Welcome back to Battery Man. It's week 4 of becoming an electrician. I've covered quite a lot so far, including more behind the scenes. And I've realised for this to be sustainable, I might have to paraphrase the learning rather than a deep dive each week.
Hey, Future Andrew here. I thought this was a good moment to pause and explain why I even bothered starting YouTube. I watch way too much YouTube, and I've always been fascinated how content creators make their content, all of the steps, sharing what they learn with the world. I'm not about that mindless content. I want to do things that people can learn from and find interesting, also with a sense of humour. So I started this with the aim of learning how it works from the creator side rather than just the watching YouTube side. My plan is to get relaxed in front of the camera to the point where I can be my usual self. I'm hoping that somebody might find this interesting, or they might be able to watch some of this information and help them in making a decision to become an electrician. And if not, just learn something. That's what YouTube is for me. It's a platform to be able to do the things that you never thought you could if you didn't have YouTube to be able to help you. I keep in mind that your first of whatever it might be is never generally going to be very good, but you can't ever make your 100th without making your first.
I started off this week's training talking about light bulbs. Ooh, exciting, hey? They all seem to have their different uses, advantages and disadvantages. There seems to be a bit of an evolution of light bulbs, starting with the incandescent, hard to come by now in the UK. There's also tungsten halogen lamps and discharge lighting with low pressure mercury vapour lamps or fluorescent tubes. Interesting to note, fluorescent lamps need a transformer or a choke to get them started, of which there's many types. In the order that we've discussed, each of these types of lamps has a progressively higher efficiency, meaning it turns more of the energy it consumes into light rather than heat. My training material doesn't mention anything about LEDs, which I'm sure we'll see a lot more of nowadays. Although it does mention the stroboscopic effect. This is where the frequency of the power supply causes the light to flicker at 50 times a second, and this can create an effect which causes spinning equipment to look like it's not moving. A number of lighting regulations were mentioned, which I'll pop in the description below. I next looked at the wiring of lighting circuits and how there are 3 different methods for wiring them. There's the joint box method, the loop-in or 3-plate method, and wiring at the switch method. The preferred method is the loop-in method. This is where the connection for each lamp and the light switch are made at the ceiling rows. You can tell the last connection in the loop by only having 2 cables feeding it. This is the preferred type of connection because it's easily accessible rather than being buried under floors with each ceiling rows feeding the next one. Nice, eh? An old property or an install could have old wiring and old methods, so it's good to know all the methods and all the possible colours of the wiring that could be used or that have been used in the past, as there's a good chance that any electrician will see them at some point. Now we get to light switches. Can we just take a moment to appreciate light switches? How many times have you turned a light switch on or off in your life? Every time you walk into a room at night, click. When you turn the light off to get into bed and run up the stairs so the monsters can't get you, click. They are everywhere and we use them every day. But what does flicking a light switch do? It makes or breaks the contact on the line conductor. Using our example of the loop-in method, a switch wire from the ceiling rows comes down to the switch and then back to the live side of the lamp, making or breaking the path for current to travel through the lamp. But what about two-way light switches? How can you turn on your landing light from 2 different places? Is it magic? Oh no, it's just a switch that has 2 different positions and 2 wires between downstairs and the upstairs light switch, which allows the changing position to change the state of the lamp, either on or off. The final version of this includes extra switches called intermediate switches, which can either make or break the connection. or change the state. If it's changing the state, it's possible to have many intermediate switches, although it's important to only have enough for all the required switching locations. Well, we started looking into light switches, but what about ring mains? Next week we're going to look at rings, radials and spurs. We'll also look at generation and distribution of electricity. Next week introduces a few calculations. Does a star connection or a delta connection mean anything to you? I'll be honest, I've heard of them before, but it didn't mean that much to me. We finally started getting into some calculations and comparing the difference between the two systems. There's more to being an electrician than having to deal with those pesky little screw covers over sockets, I'll tell you. Different countries use different methods for electrics, and I'd love for you to share in the comments below how things are done locally to you. I can't wait to see you next week. Feel free to like and subscribe. Battery Man out.